I've had it at the shop. I had a bowl. It was just full of it at the shop.
All right, we ready to get rolling, guys? 5 o'clock. All right, we're gonna get started here. We're gonna kick off with some roll call. Start with Kelly over here, to my left.
Here.
Shea Bright Mute here.
Ben Barrett here.
Glenn Davis here.
Alder Young, present.
And do any of the commissioners want to approve the minutes from the meeting for September 10th?
Make a motion to approve the minutes from September 10th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we're going to kick it off. I'm going to read the Parks and Recreation Commission mission and vision statement. So here's the mission statement. The Parks and Recreation Commission serves as an advisory board to City Council to promote and enhance quality of life by offering a broad range of safe and accessible resources, including parks, open space, trails, recreational services, and facilities which invite all to explore, play, learn, and preserve. Here's the vision. Parks and Recreation Commission is committed to identify, advocate, and provide high quality and sustainable recreation, open spaces, and cultural amenities for all citizens and visitors by balancing the need to maintain and preserve the resources entrusted to us. All right, do we have any commissioner updates in the room tonight? Saw they're making snow down in Howson.
Yep.
I heard there might be some kids skiing this week, so that's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, I think I sent some pictures to Tara. I just, on Butcher Knife Trail, they started putting some signage out and it was kind of good to see it. You know, I think it actually helps as much as I don't like to see the nature filled with signs. I think on paths like that, it really helps out.
What were the signs for?
You know, announcing when passing, you know, pass on the left, things like that. There's a couple of signs.
I was going to also say something about Butcher Knife, not so much an update, but maybe a question when I've been on there, I've been reminded that the signage announcing when dogs have to be on leash is like this big, on a sign this big.
Yes.
And I believe we had some conversation about trying to make the signage larger. I think that would be really great.
Will do. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other updates?
I just attended a neighborhood community update for the Whistler Park with the Whistler neighborhood residents and the timeline and how that process is all going. And everybody seems to be pretty happy about that.
Good topic for tonight.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that'll move us into our public comment. And this is for anything that's not on the agenda tonight. Do we have any public comment in the room? How about online? All right. Well, that'll kick us off with our discussion items for the night. We're going to start with Whistler Park.
Good evening. You get me presenting tonight. A little bit of a change. One second as I share my slideshow. All right, I'm presenting tonight along with Matt Barnard on our Whistler Park acquisition efforts with the goal of receiving your recommendation or direction from you at the end of this session. So tonight's objectives are to review our parkland acquisition process, including the bubble map and ranking of 17 properties, discuss our acquisition actions for what we're referencing as the Steamboat School District Whistler Park property, and then provide a recommendation to City Council. So for the commissioners who haven't been through this process before, in 2014, the city established a parkland acquisition process. That is one of your attachments in the packet tonight. It provides staff, all of our committees, board, city council with organized steps of how we move through these processes and what body is responsible for what actions. So this was adopted in 2024, and the Parkland Acquisition Committee was established at the same time. The Parkland Acquisition Committee includes a representative Parks and Rec Commission, that's Ben Barron, one city councilor, Amy Dixon, a Routt County Commissioner, Sonia Macy's. We also have Brad Calvert with our planning department, our city attorney, Dan Foote, and then some Parks and Recreation staff as well. The Parkland acquisition process has identified areas of interest in Parkland acquisition. So we identify a variety of parcels throughout the community, essentially in a bubble map. At first, most people's gut responses when they see this blue bubble map is thinking that, wow, they want to acquire a lot of land. If the city essentially said, we want to buy your land, that value would skyrocket. So the general concept is saying this area of the community is underserved with parkland. We might want half an acre in that area. We might need 10 acres in that area, and putting a bubble around it saying acquiring land somewhere in this general region would be beneficial to the community. So I don't want anybody to think we're actually trying to buy all of the blue area. We then take those different properties, currently 17, and we rank them on the 12 different attributes on the screen. And that ranking is completed by the Parkland Acquisition Committee. Here's our 17 different properties, how they rank. It is important to know that, while a higher ranking does and can symbolize a higher value to the community, it's really important that we have a balance of different park amenities. So essentially, we don't want to only be acquiring open space. It's just as important to be acquiring parkland for developed recreation and making sure we have a balanced approach as the community continues to grow. So like I said, here's our matrix of the 17 different properties. Included on there is the one we're talking about tonight, the Steamboat Springs School District Whistler Park. So moving on to these acquisition actions, highlighted in teal is the specific 9.2 acres we're talking about. This property is known to the community as Whistler Park. This whole region is. The 40 acres to the west is actually owned by Mount Warner Water, and we have an agreement with them to utilize it as parkland and to maintain it. Then you can see the Steamboat Springs School District property, and then just to the south where you see the tan, that is the playground and the city-owned portion. That's dedicated parkland. The parkland is classified as a community park. For those of you who were with us when we created our Parks, Recreation, Open Space, Trails, and River Master Plan, I believe Calder was the only one on the commission at the time. We do have different parkland classifications. A community park is designated from 8 to 40 acres with a general maximum distance of 3 miles between parks and a service area of 1.5 miles. They're intended to provide opportunities to the community. There is a park classification, smaller neighborhood parks, and then even smaller than that would be like pocket parks, and classifications larger in regional parks. So this is intended to have maybe some sports fields, to have some specific programming. In Whistler's case, a dog park fits very well, and features that appeal to the broader community. Attribute highlights of this parcel that ranked highly in that matrix was for Whistler's accessibility and resource availability, the active recreation opportunities, plan compatibility, that it is called out in our poster plan, in our community plan, regional plan, and then the site condition. The fact that it is already utilized as developed parkland, we don't find site conditions better, quite frankly, for the purposes we're looking for. The acquisition strategy for this parcel was building relationships both with the community, neighborhood, and the school district, with periodic check-ins with all the parties, exploring partnerships, collaboration options, and outreach. In tonight's packet, it did not include the real estate buy-sale contract. We're holding that until release on Friday for when it goes in the city council packets and the school district packets. But the terms that we've talked about with city council and received direction on is to purchase it for the appraised value of $3.6 million. the closing date of July 2027 to give community time to fundraise and city staff time to apply for grants. $100,000 in earnest money that the city would pay in January, and a paragraph about buyer's financing. That's a clause that allows the city to opt out if we are unable to secure the funding needed. So funding options for all of our parkland acquisitions. The city has a 1% accommodations tax that can be used to acquire real property for parks, recreation, and open space purposes. That's an option. The city could allocate general funds dollars or capital improvement dollars towards acquisitions. We can utilize partnerships like the Trust for Public Lands and Nature Conservancy, then different local, regional, state, and national grants, and of course, donations. For this specific acquisition, the city has already allocated $500,000 in the 2026 budget. The city will seek grant funding for $1.3 million and then depend upon community and neighborhood donations for $1.8 million. So essentially, the concept is splitting the cost in half with the community and neighborhood. Alignment with the city's strategic plan. Strategic Objective 2.2 is to expedite projects which provide equitable access to underserved areas such as West Steamboat, Whistler Park, Bear River Park, bilingual signage, et cetera. So strong alignment there, considering it's called out in the plan to identify consistent funding sources to dedicate land to acquisitions to create a savings account that's able to better utilize properties. Alignment there is as well as to identify partner space needs for indoor and outdoor recreation based upon our current population and anticipated growth. To identify key parcels for growth for indoor and outdoor recreation facilities for purchase and development, and to identify and establish a funding source to acquire developed park sites. An ongoing city council effort is to expand parks and recreation services to meet future demands in the community. Staff's goal in providing this information to you, so you realize it's not a one-off, it is a strategic planned approach. Then lastly, looking for your recommendation tonight. The acquisition approval process has already started. We presented to City Council on October 14th to receive their direction to negotiators. Then we presented to the Parkland Acquisition Committee on October 15th. We received their recommendation. Then tonight, looking for your recommendation. From there, it goes to the Board of Education on Monday, City Council on Tuesday for the first reading of the ordinance, and then the following Tuesday, November 25th, for the second reading of the ordinance. After that, the purchase agreement would be finalized and we'd be off to grant writing and fundraising. So options for you to consider tonight is to recommend City Council authorize the purchase of 9.2 acres of real property known as Whistler Park. That's staff's and the PAC's recommendation. You could also recommend City Council deny the purchase, or you could table the decision and ask staff to follow up with different information as needed. Any questions?
I just have a question about, it talks about the indoor and outdoor facilities.
Mhm.
Is there any consideration about what might the park area be used for in the future if it is able to come under Parks and Rec?
Yeah, the staff's concept is to keep the use the same as it is right now, to be off-leash area and sport fields.
Okay, and that's what I was thinking about sport fields, because it is used as soccer fields at certain points. Would that ever become more permanent soccer fields, or?
I would hope so. When we had a neighborhood meeting in October with the neighborhood, I used the analogy of essentially the investment you make with a rental property. You still want to be a nice livable area, but you're not putting major investments into that property. With owning the property, the city would likely change its tune slowly over time and invest more into those soccer fields, just like you would owning your own home. Yep.
If the city were to have a gap in funding, has it been contemplated that the school district carry it out for a period of time?
That has not been discussed.
Another question.
Mhm.
The 1.8 that the community would have to come up with, what's the discussion around the feasibility of that actually happening?
Shay, could you talk into your microphone, please? They're struggling to pick you up.
Yeah. Yep. The 1.8, I think that the community has to raise. Has there been discussion about the feasibility of that actually being able to be achieved?
We've talked about it with the neighborhood. We didn't hear immediate feedback that that wouldn't be possible. We do have an account set up with the Community Foundation, so people can donate and have tax deductions. There, we also discussed the fact that there's 2 end-of-year giving cycles between now and July 2027 that could help make that feasible too. Any other questions?
What would be the timeline for that fundraising?
Once we have asked the community, specifically the neighborhoods, to hold off on fundraising until we have the purchase agreement finalized. If we're able to follow through with this timeline, that would be November 25th. We would encourage them to start. And we would need the funds by July 20th, 2027.
Got it.
Yeah, I think the Community Foundation is a great idea. And if you guys already have a fund set up there, I guess I'm just wondering, are we, I hate to use the word marketing, but are we getting the word out to people that are in that world that there's a fund there for the park?
Have communicated that at an October 30th neighborhood meeting, but we will need to ramp up our efforts. We will be looking for the neighborhood and a few liaisons to take the lead in doing that.
Any other questions?
I'm just wondering, I'm thinking about this owner carry thing in terms of the school district. I'm just wondering if that's even something worth considering or putting into the idea that if for some reason funding isn't quite as available as we want it to be through donations, or does that create an out that we don't want either? So I'm just trying to think of my little banker brain, trying to think of ways to make sure that make sure that this happens. And that way, if the city doesn't find that the funds are available through donations or financing or whatever, that the school district might entertain an idea of taking funds over a longer period of time as opposed to a lump sum. Just a thought.
I'm happy to answer questions. I don't know if I have a response to the thought, Commissioner High.
Well, I'll just say, I don't think I have any more questions, and I think it's kind of a no-brainer, this whole thing. So I don't have any more questions.
Okay. I'll stop presenting and let you move on to public comment.
Thanks. All right. Well, that brings us to public comment. Parks and Recreation Commission will make no decision nor take action except to advise the appropriate party. Those addressing Parks and Recreation Commission are requested to identify themselves by name and address. All comments shall not exceed 3 minutes. Do you have any public comment in the room on Whistler Park? Yeah, come on up.
Hello, my name is Brad Krolski. I live at 1255 Meadowood Court, which is about 3/10 of a mile from the proposed Whistler Park acquisition. I think this would be a wonderful thing for the community, and I would recommend that the commission think carefully and support acquiring this land for the city of Steamboat Springs. When you look at aerial maps of the southern part of Steamboat, there really is not a lot of parkland there. I realized the map that you saw shows a lot of blue spots on it where prospective parks could be placed, but most of the other land in the southern end of Steamboat is already built upon by real estate, and this is really the only parcel remaining as far as I can see. So I'd hope that the commission will give that some consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Dave Carlin. I live at 3462 Stone Lane. Again, not too far from the park. First, I'd like to thank staff and the commission for basically engaging and reaching out to the community and working with us. I think that's fantastic and so much about what is great about Steamboat. So again, thanks. I'd also like to ask you guys to basically recommend the purchase to the city council, to be clear. I think even though it's been said before, and I think just before me as well, I'd like to reiterate that it's really important for, the city to have these kinds of parks and open space. And it's pretty clear that there's a limited amount up on the mountainside. But I think that you guys all know that, so I won't dwell on that. I think it would be a travesty, though, to actually lose Whistler Park, because losing space when you want to add space to the city seems like kind of a dumb thing to do, right? And I would ask that you make it a priority to maintain the space before actually creating new space with new parks and open space as well. One other item, I unfortunately wasn't able to make the neighborhood meeting. I know this was discussed there, but there was a question about the use of STR funds. And there was also this question on the board today about the 1.8 million need. I would ask you guys as a backup, because I think the purchase agreement plan seems really good, that you consider the use of those STR funds as a backup. And I know it can't be used as for a direct purchase. It has to be used for building actual housing, affordable housing. But you could create a lower purchase price and make a separate deal where some amount of money was going directly to the actual building of actual housing within the school district's plan. So you could, I think, find a way to separate those two and make that work if need be in the future. So anyways, thanks for your time, and I hope that this gets put forward. Thanks.
You.
Hi there. My name is Brian Smith. I live at 1430 Park Court. Basically, Whistler is my backyard. And the reason I was a little late coming to your meeting was I was chasing my dog, who only has selective hearing and doesn't listen to me. So it took me a few minutes to get her wound up and brought her home, and here we are. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, yeah, I'm a little biased just because it's my backyard. But we need all the parks we can get, especially with the dogs. We had 13 dogs out there just going at it, having a good old time. And the most I've ever seen out there was 17 dogs at one time. And they just love it. They love it. We love it. I don't know many people's names out there, but I know their dogs' names. So it's all just one big happy community. And please, please, we need this part. Thank you.
Any other public comment in the room? All right, we're going to move online. Do we have any public comment online? Looks like there's no public comment online. That'll bring it back to the commissioners. Any follow-up questions, you guys? Can we put the recommendations back up on the board there? Perfect. Awesome. Well, I think it seems like we're all in agreement here. Does somebody want to start off with a recommendation?
I will. Yeah. Recommendation 1, purchasing the property for a park. I think it's a no-brainer. Instead of filling our open spaces, we should be trying to create and save any of the open spaces that we already have. And I think to purchase this park for getting more soccer fields online, they're already there, and it would take far less work for Parks and Rec to get those going, for our clubs to use for soccer, for any rugby, all the stuff that we need that we're going to be short on. And I actually also agree with one of the people that talked about reclassifying STR funds, to use some of that for things like this for our community. I think that some of this is just as important as affordable housing, for the community. So number one, purchase. Yeah.
Is everyone on the similar page here? All right, so I'm gonna make a motion that we recommend city council authorize the purchase of 9.2 acres of real property known as Whistler Park. Does anyone want to second that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Awesome. Thanks for all coming out.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Do you know what time they're coming?
6.
No.
Oh, well, okay.
I sent an email out to. Maria.
All right.
All right. We wrapped up a little quicker than we planned. So we do have some guests that are on their way. I'll give an introduction to this next topic as we work on getting them here. Man, it's hard presenting and helping run the meeting at the same time. But if we could ask our guests from both the Public Works Department and Police Department to come on down. I know we have our Public Works Director, John Snyder, here to talk about multimodal transportation, bike lanes, infrastructure, and same with our Chief of Police here, Mark Beckett, to talk about enforcement education options. We haven't had a work session in a little while with Parks and Recreation Commission. So staff did set this up following the way City Council holds their work sessions. So both tables on sides of the podium are for the guests that we've invited. No one's here right now, but if we did have other attendees in the audience, there would still be the opportunity for public comment to come down to the podium. But our goal is to have an interactive dialogue discussion naturally flowing back and forth between the commission and our guest speakers. We will be having representatives from Routt County Riders joining us as well. Based on the times with our agenda, we just went through all of the last few items extremely quickly. So a bit ahead of schedule. The communication form with this stated that in response to the growing safety concerns related to e-bike usage on the city trails and roadways, the Parks and Recreation Commission will host a collaborative discussion with representatives from the Parks and Recreation Department, Police Department, Public Works Department, and Routt County Riders. The conversation will focus on the complexities, challenges, and opportunities of adapting trail and multimodal infrastructure, as well as developing appropriate regulations, education, and enforcement strategies to ensure safe and equitable use for all of our community members. This was a response to a lot of the feedback that we've been receiving over the past few years, but growing, and your dialogue at your September or August meeting, and trying to get all of the parties at the table to explain challenges and come up with hopefully some short-term, medium-term, and long-term solutions. So with that, I'll pass it off to you.
So I apologize. I was anticipating 6, and so I told these guys to be here at 6. So that's my bad. But we just did have a meeting for our CR yesterday, and so I can speak to a lot of what the concerns are there. So.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Does anybody have any questions you want to kick off this meeting with?
Maybe we could, not a question, but maybe we could start by identifying the problems. We've got lots of complaints and issues, and a lot of it's user conflict interest, how to enforce it, when to enforce, who enforces, and we've always kind of leaned on education and signage, which I think is a great place to be, but we're outnumbered with e-bikes. They're all over the place. All sorts of user groups use them for transportation and getting kids to and from places, school, all those things. So it's part of our community now. Like, I think we're past the sort of banning or you can't ride them at all. We've looked at limiting certain areas and conflicts with off-leash dogs or on-leash dogs. And a lot of our trails are multimodal, so there's a lot of people on them, different user groups. So basic operation safety is responsibility of the user, but how do we put that on them to be responsible? And those are kind of some of the issues, just summing up kind of what I've heard over our past meetings and emails and whatnot. Yeah, feel free to chime in if anybody sees any difference.
Can I ask these guys a question? I've done a bit of looking, over the past, and this is to both you guys. It really seems like our options are limited, to what we can do. I had a discussion with my 8th grade daughter today, because my mind goes to education, signage, things of that nature. And I know on the law enforcement side, from what it sounds like to me, you guys really don't have much that you can do. Public Works, it's to the point where we can do some things with the corners on the core trail, but unless we widen it, we're not going to solve any of our problems because it's already built. And I just kind of wanted to get in my mind is am I right in where I think we are? And talking with my 8th grade daughter, she said, I talked to him before I came, and I said, do you guys think that like having a class at the school, where RCR came in and talked to you guys, or because I know that especially at the middle school, the administration does a great job. I mean, I've seen the principal out there on a butcher knife, catching kids riding down the thing. I think they're doing everything they can do. But I asked my daughter, would that help? And she said, well, most of the boys in her class were, bad anyway. But she said it'd probably make it worse. So I guess that's my question, is probably our whole thing is what are our options? Because it seems like to me from what I've seen, it's pretty limited.
Go ahead.
Becky, I'm your. What we're seeing here, we're seeing this across the board in Denver this morning for a board meeting, and I spoke to the Alamosa chief. I spoke to the Pueblo County sheriff. I've talked to the Durango chief of police. This is, in my opinion, and in the opinion of most agency CEOs, this is an example of technology far exceeding statutory ability. That whether we're talking about the e-bikes or the e-motorcycles, and in some way, this, in a lot of ways, they're very different, but they kind of get lumped together. There's, a parent has to show a registration to buy a car, right? Like you can't go to a Honda dealership and buy a car without going through like online. And it's the same thing. It's a motorcycle. It's the exact same as a Harley Davidson in the eyes of the law. We're kind of just making it up as we go on how to approach these things. Now, I will say, just to pull the e-motorcycle out of it for the rest of the night, those are illegal. They're illegal outright. They have to be licensed and driven by an adult or a licensed rider. So we're seeing problems with that. We're seeing the same problems with the e-bikes, but they are kind of a separate thing legally for us. We have a tool to go after that. And we're trying. E-bikes, I don't know really what to say about it. We're talking about a technology, when we talk about speed limits and things like that for these e-bikes, it's challenging across the board. No city has an answer to it. I met with 2 of our city attorneys today to talk about it. I actually also talked to Mikey Bacino, who's kind of my traffic expert and in technology, and he really understands like the radar guns and the laser guns that we have. It's a challenge, man. Like we rely heavily on our community service officers for education and enforcement, but they don't actually have detention authority. So, if someone stops and talks to them, that's great. That's not what we're actually seeing. We're seeing the youth are fleeing from our officers. They're creating a more dangerous situation by fleeing. We're not getting compliance through that. We pulled some data, and in the last 2 years, I think we've had around 25 contacts with e-bike riders or e-motorcycle riders where we've issued warnings or citations and talked to parents. But we have, speaking specifically to the core trail and the multimodal areas, if something happens, we already have statutory ability to take action for things like endangerment. You know, there's Colorado Revised statute has that in our law. So we have the ability to go and charge somebody with that. There's just not much police departments can do with it from an enforcement standpoint when you're, you know, trying to parse out e-motorcycle or e-bikes from just regular bikes. You know, the reality is that our road bikes, I see them going town and they're just as reckless as the e-bikes. And you're talking about things that don't have speedometers. You know, I read Durango's proposed plan. I talked to Chrissy Duran, our city prosecutor, and you know, there's no way. I'll be curious to watch that unfold, but cite and charge somebody for a speed violation when they don't have a speedometer. You know, so and they can make statements about common.
Would you mind defining the Durango proposal? I don't think the commissioners know what that is.
Angela forwarded it to me. I believe their draft or their legislation or municipal code legislation to even more on their version of their core trail to, I think, a 10-mile-an-hour speed limit. It feels arbitrary to me, you know, 10 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour. The challenge for me from an enforcement perspective is I need police officers to pair with our community service officers to do it. And I don't have enough police officers. Technology, I have two. The only technology we have, they're called guns. It's like a laser version of radar. Two of them designed for use, so when I talked to Detective Vicino today, he said, like, we'll have to kind of capture speed, but that technology is designed for cars. So if you're trying to use it on a path and you've got one bicyclist and a group of bicyclists, there's no way to prove to a court which person what speed you're capturing. And more importantly, if it's next to like a bigger bicycle or if there's vehicles nearby, like on a roadway, you're not going to capture the speed of the bike. It's going to capture the speed of a vehicle, not a bicycle. It's just, there's just not technology designed for this. You know, we're trying to use things that are designed for something completely different. I think the other concern I really have with this that everyone's seeing is there are concerns about detention. Optically, you know, the idea of pulling over and detaining kids doesn't look great. Especially if they don't comply. And then it puts us in a place where we have to decide, are we going to use force on them? And I'm going to tell you constitutionally, it gets really complicated with juveniles. And then like the arrest, because if I stop you, Ben, on the core trail, and I tell you, you need to talk to me, that is in the eyes of the law and the eyes of the courts, that's a seizure. You know, so when we start seizing juveniles, there are a lot of considerations, I will say, that we have to take into account. So we can't like just detain a kid and then let him go. We have to detain him, contact the parents, get the parents to come to us from wherever they're at. It's very, very complicated, up to and including involving Child Protective Services and
Great.
for what really is, in my opinion, a parenting problem. This isn't really a law problem. It's probably not a public works problem. This is a community and a parenting problem.
I completely agree. Yeah, but so my question about that is from what I see, we're talking about between 6th and 10th grade is like the parameters I see of our kids that are in school that are doing this sort of behavior on the bike paths, right? After 10th grade, they don't even want to be seen on an e-bike. It's not cool anymore. And about 6 is about when they, you know, 6th grade is when they start riding around and, you know, doing things that their mom and dad wouldn't want them to do. I think my thing is how do we make it painful for the parents? You know, because that's where it's got to, I mean, to me, that's kind of where it's got to be, is if you're not going to, if the kids are going to run from you and they're going to do these things, I mean, I don't know why, but before e-bikes, every kid I saw on a pedal bike had a helmet on. And then e-bikes came along and my kids wouldn't even think of leaving the house on an e-bike without a helmet on. And I see these kids riding around town. So the parenting aspect of it, to me, is you're absolutely right. And I just feel like, how do we make it painful enough for the parents to pay attention and start parenting their children? You know,
If I can just jump on that, I agree with you that that's an age group to focus on. I just want to point out, though, we've had a number of public comment where they've said that the kids are actually doing a great job. It's like people in their 20s who are, it's an older but but just in general. I mean, I think it's a multi-pronged solution.
Right.
One is parents and young kids.
So I get-
So I don't want us to discount that there's also.
Oh, no, there isn't,
older
but the
population.
85%, 90% of what we're seeing, that's what the age ranges are. And so how do we do that? Do we seize bikes? Can you do that? I know I was kind of looking at Colorado law and what cities can do under those laws what are your thoughts?
We're currently, I've given my officers direction to seize the e-motorcycles. We can do that because they are, by their existence and not being registered, they're illegal. So in the same way that if you're driving a vehicle down the road, again, like a Honda Civic and it's not registered, I can tow it and seize it and impound it, and you have to go and get registration improvement. We can do the same thing with the e-motorcycles. E-bikes, we're limited in our authority. You know, if it's used in the commission of an actual crime. So if someone gets struck and there's an injury and we are looking at some sort of a reckless endangerment statute, we would seize it as part of the evidence. We would then, you know, and you're talking about a serious crime at that point, which we have not had, thankfully. You're talking about us bringing parents in and probably charging the parents for contributing to delinquency of minor. I mean, we have some statutes that we can use for parents. It hasn't been done for this anywhere that I'm aware of, and I don't know how it would hold up. And I learned a long time ago, you don't want to be the first one to go to the Supreme Court, you know, and that's a pretty extreme example of this, but you know, for what it's worth, and I know we've been working on it, we can do more, and we need to do more to connect with our parents and to teach them the responsibilities that come with this. And there's tools we could probably work with local businesses. There's things we could do a better job at that we haven't done. But I don't know. I don't know that I see a great way for a police department to jump into that role.
So, right, and that's sorry, that was my point, was we can do outreach with the kids, but like my daughter said, it's just gonna exacerbate the situation. Like, how do we get to the parents of those kids, you know?
But she's right. That's what it's turned into a game. I've actually had to reverse course with the e-motorcycle discussion and tell my guys to back off because, and Angela's heard me refer to it, but we had a couple months ago an instance of two kids in rush hour on Lincoln Ave when two of my guys tried to stop them and they split traffic and created a much more dangerous situation. And they're on a vehicle, and I could talk for hours about pursuits and the liability that a city takes on when we do things like that. And don't want to be seen as chasing a kid on a bike, an e-bike cycle, and they do something and get hurt. There is a liability for the city if we.
Personally, I'd like to keep it off the shoulders of the police department and police officers. I mean, I feel like there's so many hurdles with enforcement, and you guys' job is tough enough, and there's plenty of other things that you guys have to put your intention on. Just gathering data for it even is, you know, time consuming. And I don't know what, you know, if there's maybe a statewide or regional wide registration push, like, I mean, then you can at least tie a person to an e-bike. And then I don't know what that's like, but we've talked about safety courses in the past that, like, in order to operate an e-bike, you have to pass a safety course. Of course, that creates you have to have a position for that, software for it, all that stuff that would fall on the city's shoulders. But keeping it off of your guys' shoulders, I think, is a priority, because I know that you guys just got your hands full with calls and other things going on, and, you know, policing the trails is like an impossible task.
Yeah, and I agree. It shouldn't be on their shoulders. I guess what I'm asking is, like, you know, like we were just talking about, how do we reach the parents? You know, because it's not going to be the kids. I love the signage that we see out there, but that's not going to solve our problems. So how do we outreach to the parents to?
I think maybe a registration program or a safety
I don't think
course.
that's, now I was looking it up. I don't think you can a city can require registration on an
Be
e-bike
voluntary.
as per Colorado law.
It can be voluntary. You can say, if you're thinking about having one, you should get it registered.
Oh, so I'm
Municipalities do actually have the authority to.
I think on bike sales, they do.
They can create stricter laws in the state when it comes to things like this, and I think that's something that they could do. I'd have to talk to the city attorney.
Okay, yeah, because I thought it was like speed limits, things like that they could mess with, but with pedal e-bikes, they couldn't require registration. And then what would that do for us? Really?
Well, it could create a funding source on one aspect. I know that's not the main goal, but really the best way to get people's attention is to get their wallet. If you, I mean, enforcing, and it's always been an issue. We register cars. These are basically vehicles that any human can operate without having to go through this. I mean, I've had people try to pass me with my bike rack on an e-bike coming zinging in and out on traffic like they're disobeying traffic laws. But luckily nothing happened. But I saw a kid thinking about it and he was trying to pass, and then I was like, that's not a good idea, and he didn't. But registration or safety courses are one way. I don't know how to implement it. I don't know if it's possible. I don't know what the cost of that would be. I don't know what the effectiveness of it would be. It may not be effective at all. But we're leaning on education and parents and other people trying to be the police, parents police your kids, and some people just don't. And then some kids just don't even, they do their thing when they're out with their friends. And, there's 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, people cruising around doing all that. It's not just kids, like Shay was pointing out. So I don't think we should just focus on kids, because it's an e-bike, it's a vehicle issue, and it's a new technology, and a lot of places are trying to adapt to that. So it's tricky.
Yeah. So RCR has had some meetings about these, and I've met at length with a lot of people, and it's come to the realization for me that it's a complex issue. And if you try to break it down, I think that you can get a little bit more granular in understanding that the issue, I think you have issues with bicycles, not just e-bikes, on the core trail.
Yes.
And that needs to be addressed. When you think about what's happening with the core trail, it's being used as a place for people to recreate, both on bikes and dogs and running, and it was not set up to be that way. And so we need to think in terms of the people who live in Whistler, they're using it to commute to town, and the congestion, I use it probably 4 times a week. And it's been my experience in the summertime when it's busy that the congestion starts to happen from Freshies all the way. It increases when you get to Snake Island, and it increases even more between the search and rescue barn to Little Toots Park. And so there is a flow that is very, very difficult for people to deal with, and it's dangerous. And I think there are some things that can be done. I know Angela and I have spoken a couple times about the idea that maybe we can increase the width of the soft path to make it to where people who are walking their bikes can more freely not be on the bike path, because that's dangerous. I believe that there are ways to paint the sidewalk, for example, in front of the Botanic Park, to where we can notify people that they need to slow down. I believe that RCR has indicated that we have the resources, both some money, and we have some volunteers to create some sandwich boards along the bike path that when the farmers market's going on, it's a 10-mile-an-hour zone between Little Toots Park and the Snake Island. There's just so many ways for us to do things that are low impact, low cost, putting some signs up during the busy shopping times to tell people you cannot ride your bikes on Lincoln Avenue sidewalks. And so I think there's a lot of ideas, and there's there's the, and I'm going to talk for a bit. There's the idea of where are the pinch points? How can those be dealt with? There's us, RCR, getting into the schools and speaking much more clearly as to why the kids' behaviors are a problem. They're going to limit themselves in their ability to ride their bikes on the streets because of the behavior that they and adults are displaying. There's the helmet issue. Do you guys have the ability to ticket a kid or for not having a helmet? when they're riding an e-bike or a regular bike? Because it's both.
Yes, theoretically, but it's the same. We're not generally going to. We're going to warn the kid or call the kid's parents. I mean, I don't know, depending on the age of the child, you can't give a 10-year-old a ticket. You have to give the parent a ticket because the couple of mental state.
You can't detain them. You can't detain them to get the parents.
You can, but again, that triggers a lot of other things, including Department of Human Services.
So I guess what is the way? Because I've been noticing it has been getting better. I think that we had some public safety stuff that RCR was working on that hit online that I think may have had some impact. So I've noticed an improvement, but it's still a problem. And I think the one thing that I've heard, and you've probably heard over and over again, is that the day that somebody, I know people have already gotten severely hurt on e-bikes, and it's, I think, probably more adults than kids, but the day that somebody either gets severely hurt or killed, we are going to be really, really bummed out as a community. And I would love to see us take this very, very seriously, because the comments and the observations that we hear as RCR and as the Parks and Rec department are becoming much more direct. And we as RCR lost a major donation from one of our major contributors because we are not doing enough. And so we would like to participate, and we would like to, we have the willingness. We have 900 members to our organization. We have the willingness, we have some money, and we would love to see a way to communicate and to engage with the streets and with the police to make this work.
And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're doing quite a bit of stuff with the schools and with you guys. I know my CSOs we're doing several events a year. We've talked about doing more pop-up, like physical pop-up events along the trail where we could do some more positive messaging, give away some things. When we see a kid on a bike without a helmet, we can have a box of helmets and start doing things like that. We've talked about all those things. I'd be happy to participate and have my folks participate. I think we'll always get a better return on our investment if we do things like that.
Yeah. And I also want to make sure that I want to make sure that it's clear that we don't want to come across as being that this is that kids on bikes and kids on e-bikes are negative. I think it's awesome. I think the fact that we have so many kids who are on bikes, who are commuting, and who are participating is fantastic. But I think that the component of this, I think it comes from education. I've heard a lot of people say enforcement is where you're going to get it. I personally disagree. And I think we have a lot of ways that we can improve. Terry has a lot of good information.
Hi, I'm Terry Ganch. I'm on the RCR board. As far as the education piece goes, and to your point, educating the parents, we had a conversation at RCR about how to do that, how to get across to the parents that this is such an important, this is so important, and they really need to bring that forward to their kids, because we're not obviously going to be parenting the kids. And as much as we can do street smarts and these other programs, it only goes so far. It really has to be drove in at home. But we were talking about one thing we'd like to, if this is something, we could partner or support some type of education campaign that shows potentially how there's numbers. We could, I don't know, I mean, I'm not part of any marketing, anything, but we could partner in carrying forward that message. And still, of course, we want to keep the cycling advocacy there and not just call out the e-bikes, because it is all bikes. It's anyone on a bike. There's good behavior and bad. But we'd really like our members to take it seriously and understand that there is a huge impact. And I think a lot of people in the town do understand this, but yet still we're seeing kids without helmets, kids on bikes, 2 and 3 on an e-bike, and they're making terrible decisions in traffic and in high stress areas. And the core trail, of course, is like a congestion nightmare in the middle of the summer. But that's something that we would at least like to be a part of, is some type of education for our members. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and that's my question is how do we reach that? I mean, it's yeah, the congestion on the core trail, the incidents with dogs, on the trails, people walking on the trails. What concerns me the most is the overall picture of it. I was turning right off of Fifth Street the other day, and I saw this kid on his e-bike sitting there at the stoplight, and I was going to take a right on a red, and I looked at him. He wasn't doing anything, and then I started to turn, and he put his phone down, gunned the bike, and was out in the intersection way before. If I hadn't been hyper vigilant, it would have been a lot closer than it was. That's the kind of stuff. And then I see 3 girls on a bike, one of them with a helmet and the other one on the back that's on their cell phone. That's the kind of stuff that I see changing people's lives, in Steamboat. And I am worried about the traffic on the trails and everything else, the interactions. But that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, is getting to the parents to, this isn't okay to have 3 kids on a bike and, have the one on the back on their phone. Something's going to happen. It's going to change people's lives. So yeah, I'm worried about the trails, but I'm also worried about getting the word out there for the parents on these e-bikes. And how do we do that?
I have an idea. This might be right up the alley of Routt County riders, but talking about certificate, is there a way to incentivize parents to take like a bicycle safety certification? And it's not like a, state certification or anything, but it's just like an educational class. It's like, okay, if you put your kids through this class or people take this class, somehow they're educated and somehow they get some sort of as incentivization for participating in that. Or maybe if they bring their friends, like you bring 2 other people with you, you get a swag bag. Or I feel like we've also talked about river rangers, and we've had safety on the river. And I know some nonprofits have stepped up to kind of get out there and educate people. And I think being on the trails, having the tents set up, educating people as they're doing it, and be like, okay, hey, pop in here, get a water bottle. We'll give you a quick education class. You get a bicycle safety sticker, or just, I don't know, I think you guys can wheelhouse that, but I feel like there's a big opportunity there.
But I like that safety idea, or the safety class. I think that
We do that in the schools already. I mean, it's
we do that. We do the Street Smarts program.
Course for a weekend or something. It's like, hey,
Some like in-depth, very structured, like half day kind of thing, bike rodeo, whatever it is, that where, and yeah, you like there's some prize or something that you
like a weekend camp that you can go through an obstacle course and also teach safety and be like, hey, did you know?
It sends a positive message too,
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, we love seeing kids on bikes.
Yeah.
Whether it's e-bikes commuting to school or just for recreation purposes or whatever, it's just a matter of their use and responsibility. So that would be a good positive way to get that message across.
And then it can be maybe a little contagious if it's fun to go to. They like doing it. Maybe there's like an event that they come to. And then you also learn it's not safe to ride your bike with not closed-toe shoes on, or one person on a bike, or using your phone on a bike is just all built in with it.
Yeah.
People try to do the course blindfolded with their phone and be like,
And I
okay.
think that parents would have to be a part of that too, because when the parents are really, if they are bought in, they will be a part of that. And so
We've talked about getting involved in the bike shops as well, getting into the bike shops and making them aware that every bike shop does it a little bit differently. Some bike shops are selling different, class 2, class 3, it depends. So trying to get some consistency, try to get into the bike shops and provide some education there. Is there an age limit for how old a kid can be to drive an e-bike?
No, I think the only age limits we have pertain to the helmets.
Would that be I know there are communities that do that. Would that be something worth considering?
Again, I could tell you yes, but
I know enforcement's going to be difficult, but it's for me so if I see somebody who's stopped, who's on a bike and they're clearly not of age, I'm going to very freely tell them that they need to have a helmet on. And if I see a 9-year-old And I know that and I know I mean, it's a small community. They're driving an e-bike and they shouldn't be. It's easy for me to say, you know what? I know your parents, you're not allowed to do that. I don't know if a 9-year-old on an e-bike is a responsible thing.
And there's rental pools and like tourists that come and rent them. If you do a QR code, do a video, like if you rent a bike, you've got to watch this video.
We've talked about that. Yeah. Yep, for sure. I don't know. I think I be curious. I know that there are some communities, I think it's up in Washington, where they limit e-bikes to 12 and up. And another one is the Idaho stop. I know for sure that very few people understand that if you are under the age of 15, if you're 14 and under, you are not allowed to run a stop sign unless you're with a parent. And the Idaho stop rules don't apply to you. You are required to stop at stop signs. You're not allowed to blow through them. I don't think anybody knows that. And so that education piece, I think, would be wonderful to share as well. And there's a reason that it's there. And I'm kind of changing channels. One other component to all this is what is going to happen as it relates to west when that bike path is built. And that is going to be a much more commuter type of use trail. Is that something that is being considered in the planning process or in terms of the design, or do we know?
Hi, I'm John Snyder. I'm the Public Works Director. Public Works role in all this is the infrastructure development and maintenance. And so it is separate from the core trail, which is built and run by Parks and Rec. The trail out to the west is exactly what you say. It's meant to be a commuter trail. That said, it's pretty straight. There are not design elements in there that would encourage somebody to ride slower.
I guess so. What I have seen shift in the world of people riding bikes and people who are walking dogs is that there needs to be a separation. You can't expect, like in Durango, which is, I believe the law specifically states something to the effect of that if you are overtaking somebody, you cannot exceed 10 miles an hour. And I don't believe it addresses limitations on speed beyond that. It's just specific to when you are overtaking somebody, whether they be on a bike or riding or walking a dog. So I think that what I have seen in some areas that have a greater population than Steamboat is where they're separating cyclists from walkers, and it's clear it's either done with a curb or it's done with a line.
Yeah, this particular design does not feature that. It's an 8-foot wide concrete sidewalk for all.
What is the core trail that we have? What is it now?
I believe it's 10, isn't it?
So it's going to be small. It's going to be narrower.
Yeah, there's a stretch through the Fournier property that will be built to core trail standards because someday that will be the core trail, but the whole rest of it is all 8 foot.
Is it worth getting ahead of that and widening those trails? I know that's all cost money and but I think e-bikes and e-things are here for a bit. And it's kind of taking the place of some transportation too. I know a lot of people that commute on them, and there's times that it's okay to go fast and you're commuting, and if there's not a lot of people on the trail, like a straight trail is good for that. So I don't know if widening the trail or budgeting for that is helpful to try and get ahead of that. I mean, on the infrastructure side, perhaps that might be beneficial. I don't know.
You know, I can have our city engineer reach out and ask, but it's probably too late to make any design changes at this point. The design's all overseen and vetted through CDOT, and it's going through 4 different grants. And so I don't know that we'd have much ability to change the design at this stage.
Probably financially, it'd be a lot more money too.
Right.
It just seems to me that we're going to be we're not going to be surprised if we're dealing with the same issues if we're seeing people who are identifying great places to walk your dog or whatever along that path, and we've somehow not seen this coming. So it seems to me that that's well, like you said, that ship sailed, it sounds like. But trying to, I guess I would love to to go back to the idea of trying to identify ways to deal with the congestions on the core trail. Is that something that we can, how would we go forward if we have the will and we have,
Unlimited funds.
well, I mean, we don't have unlimited funds, but if we have the will from RCR and we have volunteers and we have the willingness to buy the 10-mile-per-hour. So I was in Winter Park. Winter Park has a beautiful new core trail, and about every 200 yards, they have a bright yellow 10-mile-an-hour speed sign, and there is no way to miss it. Our speed signs are too high and they're small, and they're not very often. And so, which is fine for probably going between Whistler Park and the Botanic Park, but for a lot of areas, it's not. I don't think riding your bike on the bridge between the search and rescue barn and Howelson is appropriate many times because there's so many tourists looking at the river. So I feel like there needs to be some ways to identify what the pinch points are and how are we going to deal with them.
Heavy signage and paint is a pretty easy fix for a lot of things.
It sounds good. I don't know if it actually is. I do know that my experience has been that those sandwich boards with the lower speed signs, they can be taken away too. When it's not busy and it's 8 o'clock in the morning and people are, a lot less riding their bikes along or walking along there, it's appropriate to go 15 miles an hour. So would it be something that we can say, okay, RCR, you have the authority between this period of time, or how does that work? How would that work?
I'd have to defer that to Angela.
Yeah, that would come to our world.
Okay.
And Jenny and Stephanie, you're welcome to come take one of these seats and contribute to the conversation. We do have a lot of options with signage, especially if it's, say, your bridge recommendation of having sandwich boards or signage up seasonally or times of day that we utilize volunteers to put up and down that says dismount. Like all bikes must dismount and have it large. We have a lot of options with signage. Some may, depending what the signage and rule is, we may have to update our city code and go through that. That's more of a procedural process and getting Parks and Rec Commission's recommendation and getting it approved by city council and vetting it with our legal team. But signage is a very viable option.
Angela, excuse me. As far as signage goes, and we were actually discussing this, the signs that are on Lincoln for the sidewalks, is that something that is in our wheelhouse or is that part of CDOT?
Now I pass it back to John.
That's us. The city does that.
Okay. Would we be able to potentially get better signage and or bike route signs?
Can we do better at that?
Well, just.
What would you guys like?
See that, like a more obvious sign, maybe.
I don't know. I can see him. I can see him on the corners when I'm driving down the street.
Well, yeah.
How much?
You see them when you're on your bike and you've got 15 other signs along there that don't identify.
They seem to be ignored.
Well, I don't know. Okay. Yeah. I'm just saying I could see the signs, and if people are still doing them and there's signs up there, I don't know about putting a sign every 10 feet is going to change anything.
Right.
Well, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I think that if you just are simply trying to get people to not ride their bikes on this, trying to get people to not ride their bikes on the sidewalk, I think sometimes a lot of this stuff is the first part of, a lot of people don't know to look whether or not that they can have a bike on it. They're just going to do it because you can. And so seeing a big sign up on the sidewalk that says, you know what, this is not for bikes, that person knows going forward. I'm not saying that we need to have it all the time, but maybe when it's busy, when we have a lot of people in town, we need to remind them that this is not a place to ride your bike. So I don't know, do you have more thoughts on that?
I do. What would be really nice is, because people will eventually, I just see people riding their bikes on Lincoln on the sidewalk all the time. And I'm assuming some of them don't live here. So it would be great if we could somehow make a bike route sign or at least have one at these various intersections like 7th and Lincoln, 5th and Lincoln, where they would potentially be joining the sidewalk, where they would know that there's bike lanes on 5th and 7th, and that they could just, that would guide them right to Yampa or to Oak, I guess. If that's something that could be,
You're talking on the side streets as opposed to on Lincoln?
well, yeah, like the intersection, like 7th and Lincoln, for example. So 7th and Lincoln, there is that no bikes, no any wheeled thing. But if there was a bike route, go this way, kind of just a little more obvious.
Where would you put it?
The sign?
Yeah.
I would probably have the sign so that it points up or down 7th bike route. And then that way, because of that bike lane, then it could just dump into either parallel street off of Lincoln.
John, does the multimodal plan have dedicated bike routes for people to transport from either north, south of town or east, west?
It does.
'Cause I'm guessing our traffic engineers have probably identified which pathway is best, and then we could evaluate that and maybe sign it better is what I'm hearing.
That's correct. And 5th and 7th are two of the bike routes, and then 11th was going to be, but we were unable to build the infrastructure to make it that way.
The whole Yampa Street is all, but you can ride a street on.
Yeah,
Correct.
that's great.
Yep.
Yeah, but to Terry's point, I'm Holly Wyke, for those of you who I haven't met. I am an advisory member of the Rock County Riders Board and former Parks and Rec Commission member. Some nice big green arrows that said bike route would be super helpful. I suspect that many of you have seen, for example, people coming through town when they're riding the Great Divide route, and they're riding on the shoulder of 40 past Old Town Hot Springs headed towards Ski House because they don't know there's a core trail very close to them that would be much more pleasant and safer. And I think that we probably are running into the same thing with visitors to town, that why wouldn't I ride on the sidewalk? It's a perfectly safe place for me to get out of traffic. And they don't know that there's a core trail. They don't know that Yampa is completely cleared for bikes on the full width of the lane because we don't have any signage pointing them that direction.
There's still some gaps in the trail in that, over in that area by City Market, and kind of there's some that just dead end, and by the intersection of Mount Warner Road and stuff too, I think. Like there's goes by Orhouse and like behind Qdoba, there's sort of some dead end stuff there that's like you can ride it up through and then it just stops.
Yeah, if there was a sign pointing you back to a better way to rejoin the core trail, right, as opposed to being lured by those stubs of trail/sidewalk right by the house that think you're going to get behind the entire City Market complex, but you can't.
Right, yeah, I think there's also one behind the Residence Inn. It sort of like goes up and then just dead ends by Safeway. Because they got a fence there. So there's some gaps in some of those like connectors stuff that I don't know, we could probably look into and just see how to improve that. But I mean, people just hop on 40 and then on the sidewalk there too, so.
And those are all legal options, but we do a better job, I think, with wayfinding signage that would point people towards better options.
Hey, John, so some of the looking around that I was doing on this is some of the cities that had older infrastructure. They were talking about mitigating corners, bridges where they come in, like down by the Old Town Hot Springs, where the bridge comes across there, and you have the trail going up and down 40 there. Have you guys looked at trying to mitigate any of those, I guess, intersections that would be cheaper than, obviously making it 12 to 14 feet wide instead of 8?
I think, are you referring to an intersection on the core trail?
Yeah, I'm sorry, on the core trail.
That's probably my area then.
Okay.
When you say mitigate, could you describe that more?
Well, I've seen where they've widened because of the, cities that have come across where they've outgrown their infrastructure, and a lot of them, some of them have been using them to mitigate the e-bike issue too. Is some of the corners are harder to navigate because they weren't built for
So smoothing out the corners so it's an easier.
Yeah, like where the bridge goes over and meets up with the core trail,
The
right?
new
Right.
bridge we just built,
What's that?
the bridge we just replaced? Or are you talking about a different bridge?
Hippie dip.
I was gonna say Hippie Hot Springs.
Okay, I was
gonna
thinking.
say Hippie Hot Springs. I didn't know if that was.
Okay, I was
But
thinking,
you know, like you come over that bridge and then the trail goes both directions. There's no, like I've seen some of them where they round those out, they make it a little more visible, things like that. I mean, if we're talking about putting a bunch of signage up, would it be worth it? Not, you know, I don't know how cost effective it would be or what it would cost, but I can think of 3, 4, 5 intersections on that trail that if we gave a little bit of love to, it might mitigate some of that.
I totally agree with you on that bridge.
Right.
There's so much vegetation there that you can't see very well.
And it's one of those places where you're talking about that's in the summertime is high traffic.
Oh, for sure.
know?
Yeah, for sure.
That's just for infrastructure wise, instead of getting into the tens of millions of dollars, you know, that just seems like for us, you know, to help the infrastructure that we have right now is identifying a couple of those corners and seeing what it would cost us to do something.
Going into some of those tunnels. I think one of the challenges with painting the surface is you make it slippery. Which going into some of those corners on the bridge or under the tunnels. Yeah, that would be really helpful. Unfortunately, it turns to glass, I think, when it gets wet. So
But David, along that point, we do have some nice tall walls next to those tunnels.
oh yeah.
That, I mean, one of them's got a really cool mural and I wouldn't want to screw that up, but some of the other walls that haven't been decorated, we, instead of putting it on the pavement, a really, really big sign saying slow down.
But there's paint out there that you can make that's
Yeah.
not slippery too.
I think those are options for some additional paint work that could
Yeah.
provide some etiquette guidance.
Yeah, you'd have to probably do it every year, but when I've been in Boulder and I've been in Winter Park and some of these places, it's to my eye, I notice it. And I think that again, I just would love to avoid the fear of somebody getting really hurt coming in through something. And I know they already have, but it would be great if we could make it a little safer.
I think the cop in me wants to, if there's one thing I am an expert in, it's human nature. If you, I'm not an engineer at all, that's that guy. But if you make it easier to take turns faster, they're going to go faster. So if you open up those corners, you are going to create the unintended consequence. I can 100% guarantee people will go faster.
This is true. There was a book that actually we were in our meeting last night. That was Steve Williams brought in that basically says if you make the lanes on highways wider, people go faster.
It's 100% correct.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of foot traffic between like 5th and 10th Street or 5th and 12th Street. Like that's where you get those choke points is because you've got tourists walking around, you've got people going out to the parks, you've got pushing baby strollers, walking dogs, and like that, those do that's where you run into the foot traffic. I mean, if you're riding an e-bike behind Emerald Fields, like it's not really as much of an issue, but once you get to Fetcher Pond, like then there's tubers coming in and out and people putting it on the river. So there are definite zones where there's more foot traffic, more multimodal use, and that's kind of where we're kind of identifying some of these major issues.
Those areas, similar to driving on I-25 in rush hour, what you're seeing as congestion is actually not a bad thing from the perspective of people riding their bikes fast because it physically prevents them from doing it. Like it creates a danger when they're approaching that, or if they try to navigate through it at high speed. But if you're actually congested in those areas, people have to physically slow down. So it may look bad, but I would challenge the group to think that might actually be a good thing and not a bad thing.
I think that's such a valid point. I think that's a really good point. One of the comments, so I went and talked to some of the bike shops on Yampa, and to your point, I think part of the reason people go so fast on Yampa is because they can. But the comments that I've heard is that Yampa is incredibly abused by all users. Nobody's going 15 miles an hour, including cyclists. And Yampa is being used as a bypass for Lincoln when it gets busy. And so the comments that I've heard is it would be nice if there would be just simple enforcement of the speed for all users, cars, bikes, everything on Yampa, because it's almost laughable is the what I'm hearing, how badly it's being abused.
From an enforcement perspective, I'll tell you, it is on our long list of enforcement areas.
Yeah,
And it's a very, very long list.
I'm sure it is. And I don't want to imply that you're not doing your job. So.
Oh, no, I know. And that's not how I take it at all. It's easy, the word enforcement, it's easy to throw it around. I think if you don't live in the world and actually know what that means,
Mhm.
It's an easy thing to defer to and say, well, we need more enforcement. The reality is it's just not that simple. The word enforcement, I would ask folks, what does that actually mean? Like describe what the physical act of enforcement means. And I'm willing to bet most people can't, because it's not a traffic stop. Enforcing traffic laws is easy because it's cars stopping other cars. Enforcement when it comes to things like pedestrians and bicycles is not easy. And I am willing to bet if people, the majority of folks, because they don't need to, they don't understand what that means. And they don't understand what happens one step past that. It's great if I say, hey, buddy, come on over here, and they comply, then great. I can educate them or write them a ticket or whatever. Those people are not the people we're talking about. Like those people are the people that RCR, my CSOs, we're already getting to them. Those are our youth riders that are already complying with the law. This is, it seems analogous to the dog poop discussion and the dog off leash thing. We're not talking about the people that comply with the law. We're talking about the people who don't. And when you're talking about people who don't, more legislation isn't going to change anything. You have to come up with some way to get through to them. And unfortunately, what I've seen in other communities is it is tragedy, and when a kid dies on a bike or a person in general dies on a bike, people will pay attention. And everyone here is trying to stop that from happening. From a law perspective, I will tell you, it's not our job to stop that from happening. That's the parent's job, or that's the person's job. Nobody wants to hear that, but because that's a tough thing to actually understand. But when you're talking about parents who, when we go to their door because we've caught their kid drunk or using drugs, and they yell at my officers about messing with their kids, that's the cultural problem that we're talking about. Right. And that problem bleeds across all these different areas. Kelly and I have talked about it before. I don't have an answer for that, but I can tell you the solution to this thing is getting with the parents and teaching the non-adolescents to be better community members.
Do you see an avenue to make, based on what your experience is through the schools and through all that you've done with education with kids, do you see a good path for that?
I think to be clear, I think we're doing really well with it. I think we're doing better than other areas that I've seen. Okay. Our youth engagement is far better than most communities. We can do more. That certainly wouldn't hurt finding the time and the manpower, but we've got partners who want to do it. I'm happy to do it. I remember as a youth growing up in Tonawanda, New York, having the Parks and Rec department did like the bike fairs and stuff. None of it hurts. I don't know that you're going to target, you're still going to have your bad actors.
Right. And that's where I think like all of us need to put our heads together and figure out how to reach the parents, and for the congestion on the core trail, for some tragedies that could happen in town. Like, that's what I think we need to do is, like, we got the kids at the schools. How do we get to the parents? And how do we get to the parents to even say anything to them? With your experiences of dropping kids off at houses, I can only imagine, right? But how do we get to those people that may have just checked out and not made sure that they made it important to their kid to wear their helmet, but they just, because they're work, life, whatever it is. Yeah, RCR, how do we get to those parents?
Is it like a gift card? Like if you take the safety course?
I don't want to give them anything. I'm trying to figure out how we
Has it been any?
How do we engage the parents? How do we even get them? They're not going to come for a gift card if they're not making sure their kids got a helmet on. You know what I mean? So how do we reach them?
Does anybody have any experience with going through coaches for those types of messages. I know that we can go to the Winter Sports Club and we can say, listen, a lot of your kids are blowing through stop signs, on their way down to on their way down to Howelson Parkway to get to practice. Is it something that a coach would have an influence on?
Right. And that's another thing that I wonder. Like I see, I started following the city on social media, things like that. Is there other things besides, giving out gift cards or having things at the school? Can we start a social media thing that might reach some of these parents? It might touch some of them, like, hey, this is what's going on, in town. Do something fun, do a fun video, with kids on e-bikes, something to raise awareness in that respect. If we start hitting all those different aspects of it.
As a parent, what would get your attention?
I don't know, a fun, well, I grew up in the 70s, so I saw, what was it, Blood on the Asphalt, for driver's ed. I'm not talking about that, but I mean, make it fun. Like, hey, because you've got to catch them in the first 3 to 10 seconds. Is just put something together that catches their attention and has 3 kids on a bike, one with a cell phone in the back, because anyone who sees that knows it's wrong. I don't care what kind of parent you are, but if they see that and then they see their 3 daughters riding off on the bike or whatever it might be, maybe it gets them to think about it. I'm just trying to figure out on outreach, because I think that's where we're at, is with outreach. Signs may make a difference, but I think it's the outreach to the community, to the parents.
Yeah, I think we've done quite a bit of education on social media around this. And I think at some point it just becomes noise.
I've been following you guys. I haven't seen any of it. I don't know. I'm not throwing any rocks. I'm just saying, like,
you need to like different feeds then, because it's all over mine.
I don't know. When you follow RCR, don't you get all their stuff?
Yeah, no, it's out there.
Mike Lane does, our police department Instagram and Facebook is pretty active with stuff like this. And like our SROs they make videos all the time.
Right. We just got to find out who's following what, right? Because
I
knew nothing about this until about 2 months ago. And
yeah,
I know way
there's
too much about it.
You guys have, I'm going to just step very slightly out of my wheelhouse. Clearly it's a passionate community topic, and I'm friends with Shannon Lukens, and I've done radio stuff with her talking about this. There are platforms out there that are hungry for it, and I'm sure would be more than happy to participate in messaging and social media, traditional media. The pilot, I'm sure, would be willing to do stuff. You could talk about town halls. I would be happy to contribute time to, if we were to organize town halls for safety purposes. Again, it never hurts, and it's never wasted time. I doubt you'll be getting all the people who you're talking about. And Shay said earlier, and she's not wrong, when I talk to my CSOs or they come into my office and they're upset because someone flipped them off when they tried to stop them, talk to them, it's actually not usually the youth. It's usually some 20 or 30-year-old, and they're using some pretty colorful language. That's a problem for us, because there's not really a lot we can do. And there's nothing worse than people knowing that we can't. There's nothing worse than having a law that people know we can't enforce.
If I can just, something I've been thinking about as we all are talking about this was how it really seems like it needs to, like, we're talking a lot about social media and marketing and communications. I've been taking notes. I have a very long list of all the things that we've brainstormed. So at a certain point we need to circle around. But one of them was around all the different ways of getting the word out. And I had a couple thoughts. One, the chamber, whether bringing like the chamber into it is ever, or other entities. Chamber a couple years ago did a whole thing on kindness floats the boat. And I was like, well, that would be a really great way to bring this in, right? Like getting people to think about how do you want to show up in your community. So there might be other people to include. And so much of what we're talking about, I wrote down, is there a way to like utilize a marketing firm? Because if we really want to make the messages land right, we might need some expertise. I think I know I shared this at another meeting, but I'll say it again because I think it's really profound. My daughter, who's 13, when we're skiing, there's a sign on loading some of the lifts that has a snow angel. And it says basically, I can't remember the wording, but it basically is like someone was going too fast and they hit this kid and now they're dead, right? And it talks about the snow angel. And my 13-year-old who rides an e-bike was really, like, she brought that up and wanted to talk about it. Like, it was super profound to her. And so I use that as examples. I think there's messaging that is similar to maybe Blood on the Road, but not quite that bad, that we like, but getting some help to help us think about how do we cater to these different audiences, and then think about a multi-pronged approach, right? We've mentioned so many different places that we can do this, and it might need to be like all hands on deck. My other thing I was thinking about, and this might be a tall order, is sure a lot of us have had opportunities to, hopefully you've had opportunities to spend time in Europe and European cities. There are bikes everywhere. I was in Munich this summer and it was insane how many bikes there were. And I think we all know, like Amsterdam, maybe it's going outside of just cities in the United States. And is there a way to look at maybe what European cities have done to tackle? And I know maybe e-bikes have got to be increasing there, but they've been managing bikes and pedestrians in much larger numbers than we ever have. And so I'm wondering if there's also ideas coming outside of the US that we could look at.
Is there anything that you guys have heard that you think that would be low-hanging fruit that we should do, that you guys would say, that's great, that would be something I would support, or that you would be behind in the effort to try to create more awareness and safety?
I mean, I think just using my anecdotal knowledge from other areas that we've been exploring, like recruiting.
And I'm not saying outside of this, but in this conversation as well. So I would love to try to take some of the things that you guys would say, we would support that.
Yeah, like,
and you as well. Sorry.
A common thing I've heard from this commission, and I've heard from many people, is the word phone, because every one of our kids has a phone and their faces are always buried in them for the most part. If you get the right people who understand how to leverage social media, you can do targeted ads. You can target it down to a building, but we could do ads in our community and that pop up on Instagram and Facebook. Now, kids will tell me I'm a nerd for saying Facebook and Instagram because they're using Snap and 10 other things that are beyond that. And what I've learned in my role is that I don't understand that stuff, but there are people who do. And if you can connect with them, and if you've got the resources with RCR and you've got the financial resources to them in the chamber, that's an easy low-hanging fruit, and it's gonna be in their face, right? That we've had success with that from a recruiting perspective. So, signage is great. I think signage, to me, I can speak for John. I know I can speak for John. I can say we get requests all the time for radar signs and speed signs on our surface streets, and I'll tell you that you could literally put a sign every 10 feet and it's not going to stop speeders. The radar signs don't stop speeders because responsible citizens don't speed. Speeders speed, and they don't stop until that's something that we do take enforcement action on. And that's where I need to focus my 2 or 3 officers that are working every shift on those things. So low-hanging fruit, to answer your question, yeah, social media, that's where the kids are right now. Sorry, I know someone wants to say something, I hope. You're probably never going to get through to the older folks, but if we can pare out the other offenders, it would be easier for my folks to then target your older offenders. I feel more comfortable taking a different legal action. Like if I've got a 30-year-old on an e-bike and he's driving crazy and he tells me to do something that he shouldn't, I couldn't shove him off his bike, and that would actually hold up in court. Mm-hmm. Optically, I'd like to reserve that for when we've moved these other things off the table. But we could do like specific events. I can't dedicate an officer to sit on the core trail and do radar, but I can dedicate an officer or more in CSOs to do it a few times a year in the summer. We could kick off summer with RCR. We could do pop-up events where they go out there with the radar gun, and we could use it as an educational tool and say, hey, come over here. Did you know how fast you were going? And it would be with officers and CSOs. And if we had somebody who was out of control, we could give them a ticket, and we could do it in front of everybody. Like, there are ways we could try to do it. Regular bikes, a ticket is probably not going to hold up in court because there's no way for us to say that the person should know how fast they're going.
Most of them do. Most of them do.
Yeah, I'll tell you that actually there's science and studies that humans are really, really bad at judging speed. And when I saw that Durango legislation, the first thing I talked to Chrissy about, I was like, well, if I got a ticket, I would say, I didn't know how fast I was going. I thought I was going 12 miles an hour, And like those are actual science studies that we use in law enforcement. The engineers use it for their traffic engineering as well. But
Well, to David's point, though, there's a lot of people who are very keen on tracking every bit of data about their bike ride.
Most
They
people
have
do.
a screen.
Although-
My commuter bike does not have a computer on it, but everybody else has a computer on every other bike. And they can see that I am averaging currently 15.6 miles per hour. And my max down that hill was 35. And
Yeah.
my slowest ride for today was 4.
And I believe
but there's no way to bring that into court, I guess is my point, unless you were to surrender that to me when I stopped
And
you.
it wouldn't have recorded your transient at the moment.
Right.
It would just be highs and lows.
What I'm getting from you is that, so again, we've had meetings and we've talked about trying to focus on pinch points along the core trail. And maybe we get some volunteers in a high vis vest to make them look more official, to be able to say, please slow down. And so, what's that?
With a bullhorn.
Yeah, the bullhorn. And when we find that many of the volunteers are realizing that this particular area is a problem, and we get a CSO to come in and say, we need some enforcement. And it might be Winter Sports Club kids, who knows? I don't know.
Question, as far as that like weekend campaign kickoff, for summer, are CSOs the only one that can use that radar gun?
No, so our CSOs can't. So they
Okay.
can't.
So it would be,
They would have to be an officer. CSOs don't have the legal authority to detain somebody.
Okay.
So if we're telling someone to stop and get off their bike, we can call it voluntary, but if they take off, then
Yeah.
we have nothing. You really need a sworn officer. When the CSOs deal with dog issues, we're really relying on that person to voluntarily stop and talk to them. They don't actually have the authority to detain anybody. Only officers have the authority to detain somebody. So, but if we plan those events, I would be happy to have officers. I'll go out there and do it. It'll be fun. You'll see me yell at people.
And it may never happen. I just want to, it sounds like we're on the same page. We would love to create awareness. We would love to create, understand some places downtown specifically that maybe we could have some awareness and understand where there may be some opportunities for enforcement. And maybe there won't be. I don't know.
Hi, everybody. Chairman, Commission. I'm Brent Demmett with RCR. I have a question for Chief. You mentioned enforcement and then no one knows what it is. Can you kind of tell us in a nutshell, what you think enforcement is, and then maybe we can craft a model that would fit that for you?
Yeah, well, I can tell you definitively what it is from a law enforcement world. Enforcement is a detention. So if I see a violator of any law, traffic, bike, whatever, if I take any kind of enforcement action, the word enforcement applies across the board, literally to anything we do. It's a detention and an investigation. So when you're dealing with things like traffic or drugs, you're dealing with things that generally don't involve juveniles, or at least really young juveniles like bikes do. And you're dealing with things that are really clearly defined in statute. What's not clearly defined in statute is how, and has not been challenged in court when it comes to bikes, is how do you enforce a speed limit? How do you enforce certain things? Now, I could tell you, if the commission were to go to council and say, ban e-bikes from town, that's something I could get behind. Like, that's something I could take action on. I know that nobody would have the flavor for it, and but it's a very black and white thing for us to enforce. So an enforcement, to your question, is a physical contact with a law enforcement officer, usually with the ability to either issue a citation or make an arrest. And when we look at these things, we in law enforcement have to look at it not just in that act, but we have to look at consequences. So what happens, it's easy when things go right. We live in a world where they don't. So what does that look like for us? If someone flees in a vehicle, for an example, police departments have very, very clear policies that dictate our pursuit, our ability to pursue vehicles. That doesn't exist for bikes. And for the record, for vehicles, it's very, very restrictive for a lot of good reasons. we also have to consider constitutionality and what it's going to look like in court. So again, when I saw the Durango, the email about the Durango proposed legislation, the first thing the police officer and me said is there's no way this would hold up in court, because how do you prove that the person knew what speed they were going? A vehicle has a speedometer, or it should, because it's required by law as equipment. Bicycles and e-bikes are not required by law to have speedometers. So there's no way that I could prove in court that that person knew how fast they were going. I believe you 100% that many of them may know, but I promise you when they're sitting with one of my officers, they're not going to say that.
Would it, for example, would you picture that it would be legal to set a barricade across the entire core trail one day and just stop everybody that didn't have a helmet and say, hey,
Parks and Rec can do whatever they want.
I mean, if that's, I mean, because enforcement, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Enforcement, especially on a bike, is very difficult. How do you pull somebody over on a bike with flashing lights? How do you chase them down if they decide to blow you off? Right. And I think that, you know, certainly stopping them has nothing to do at that point with what speed somebody was cycling at. But if there were just a, hey, we're doing a helmet check today for all of our minors, we barricade the core trail and there's a check and you're not wearing a helmet. How old are you? You know, is that an action that would be feasible?
We could do it. I think we just need to be really careful and think it out. I mean, when I talk about pop-up events, that's kind of what I'm thinking is, you know, like not a barricade straight across, but if you stagger it so they have to go between it, force them to slow down.
Okay.
But I promise you, someone will go around it, and you just got to know that that's going to happen. And then again, and you weren't here when we first started talking about juveniles, but I will say from a detention perspective, it's really tricky when we stop and detain a juvenile. Like, in the courts look at 15, 15 and above, not so much. If you're stopping 10-year-olds on a bike, we got to be like, we have to call the parents. If an officer is involved and we have physically detained that kid, we actually can't let go of that kid until we get a custodian to come take them from us. And if a custodian can't come and get them from us, and this wouldn't actually happen, this is why we don't do this. We would have to call Department of Human Services, and they could, like, if a parent doesn't answer their phone, they literally could start like a removal process where they would remove the child from a parent's custody temporarily over a helmet. It doesn't fly.
If anybody wants that, I'm just curious to see, would it be possible to go, hey, you're 12 years old, you're not wearing a helmet, I need your name. You're free to go.
So
I'm going to have to call your parents.
So you're good up until the I need your name and we have to call your parents.
Okay.
You can educate them. You can say, what's your name? Like, there's ways to say, hey, what's your name? And my officers are really, really good at that. But if you are saying, I need your name and we have to call your parents, it's a detention.
I have an idea, kind of out of the box. It's kind of a Gen Z approach too. What if there was like an app that was developed that made you, like, you got double points for going slow in a slow zone. Your phone tracks you. People have their phones with them. You get points for watching safety videos. You get points for logging miles. You can tier up. You can upgrade your armor, whatever. Like, everybody's got their phone with them. It's tracking them anyway. They can log in. They can say, are you wearing a helmet today? Yes. Okay, great. You got 2 points for that. And then there's, like, I don't know, it's the technology is already there. It takes it off the shoulders of changing behavior, and it lets people change their own behavior through using. And maybe Strava is huge, and everybody loves, hey, I did this, I clocked this many miles, and people are riding those many miles anyway. It takes some development and some thought process behind it, but that would be in the incentivization, that's such a hard word to say, process, and then you can build rewards into it. They don't even have to be material rewards. They can be like digital rewards or whatever. I don't know. It's kind of a Gen Z approach, but it might be worth looking into to create a marketing campaign around, hey, try this new app. You can use it to track your miles. You can get points for going slow. You can
Free milkshake.
Yeah, free milkshake. I don't know. It's just
You can see who's in the top tier.
Yeah.
Like, oh, all these kids are in the top tier because
Yeah.
they stopped at the stoplight, they stopped at the stop sign. And maybe those kids that aren't in the top tier want to get up to the top
Yeah.
tier.
And I think you can geofence areas too. I know the scooters in the city will stop going if you get into a crosswalk, like the little.
Yeah, that takes software on each individual bike though.
Yeah, you can do it on your phone. I mean, I'm not saying to actually physically slow the bike down, but you know, it's like, oh, I blew through 5 zones that were geofenced on my phone, and I lost points for doing that. But if I get to, you know, the gold tier level, then, you know, yeah, I mean, it might be a sort of a softer approach than doing that. I would, like I said, it'd take some development and probably have, I don't know, but it's incentivizing, it's making people change their behaviors through the systems that are already, I mean, they do it with weird video games like farming and animal, you know, whatever. There's all these games that are time wasting games that you harvest your crops and you get points and then you can, you know, I don't know. It's just kids are into that. People are into tracking their miles on Strava. That's it.
Mighty young of you. It's very young of you.
Yeah. Well,
I like it.
just the thought.
I like it.
I do want, and Chief, I appreciate the explanation. That's helpful. I work on the mountain in the wintertime as a ski patroller, and you know, different rules because we're private. We kind of do whatever we want. It's nice.
Yes, you can.
And due process isn't really a thing, but so it has its advantages. But we track. We're data driven. We track everybody, and you'll stop a kid and you'll pull his pass and you enter it into the system and you don't do anything. You're like, hey, I really need you to slow down. Did you see the 14 signs that you skied past that said slow? And the answers we always get on the ski resort is, I didn't see the sign, or you should have put a sign there. I mean, that's nature, right? That's human nature. But when that person, you stop the kid a second time and it shows up that they've already been stopped and we pull their pass and they get pulled for, you know, 3 days or 7 days, whatever it is, it's usually not more than that. I've never seen a kid come back and have a third stop. And so in that type of enforcement, I see an impact. I also see an impact in Munich because I'm throwing my kid under the bus here. My kid got arrested in Munich for riding 2 up on a scooter in Munich, and that was fun. That was a good little Thanksgiving gift to the family. But they enforce it, and like he was at the police station detained with another kid from Steamboat that I won't name. But anyway, but they're laying it down over there, and he's not going to do that again.
Yeah.
And so I see the practical, real world implications of what most people would call enforcement, which is, you know, they didn't get education is great. We need the education, but I think at some point, if the rubber doesn't meet the road, right? I don't feel like there's going to be as much progress as there could be. And I love your idea about, if we go out 2 or 3 times in the summer, that's a great start. I love it. I'd encourage that for sure.
I think that would work. Just, you know, Europe, Munich. Remember, it's another country. They don't have a constitution, and they can do whatever they want. Yeah. You hit a valid point. I mean,
human nature. That's
yeah. You know, your point about the mountain though, and like pulling a pass, pulling an icon. I mean, it's very similar when I write a ticket. I had a gal yelling at me the other day. I wrote her for speeding, and she wasn't yelling at me over the $50 speeding ticket she got or $100. She was yelling at me because of the points on her license and her insurance, right? Like that's money is where people feel it. And the reality is in this community, we're an affluent community, you know, a $100 ticket. Even if I do start writing tickets to parents, they're not going to really care. Taking the bikes and the motorcycles they'll care about. Which is why.
Can you impound them? Can you impound the e-bikes?
I don't think we can. I'd have to dig further into the e-bike discussion because they're not inherently illegal. Again, and remember earlier I said if it was used in like an actual criminal offense, not a civil offense, yes, we could seize it as evidence.
Running stop signs?
That's civil. Yeah. I can't seize a bike any more than I can seize a car for that. Now what?
So you won't take my car?
I'll ruin a surprise and I'll tell you we're gonna start unrolling a program where we're buying some very, very robust locks that are virtually unbreakable, and we're gonna start locking e-motorcycles, and with a contact us to get your motorcycle back. And like my SRO is we're just gonna start taking them from the high school, and we're gonna tell them, you know, if it's parked at the high school, I'm gonna cut the lock off it myself. We'll take it. And the parents, we've already started seizing them and making the parents come to us before we give it back. I can do that because they are by their existence illegal, as long as they're not registered. E-bikes is different discussion. That's why I said in the beginning, e-motorcycle and e-bike are two different things, because e-motorcycles are, if used by someone who's not licensed or if they're not registered, they are illegal. So for the same reason, I could seize a car for something like that.
So everything from, say, like a Stark, a Ciron, to an e-box, anything that doesn't have a pedal and has a throttle is considered an e-motorcycle.
And I think, like, I just heard another language out of you, but yes.
Okay.
I don't know the brands, but yes, what Krista Matuzio, who is my expert, she tells me if it doesn't have pedals, it's an e-motorcycle. It is a little bit more robust than that. Like, it has to do with speeds, and I think it has to do with like the actual motor capacities on those things for the electric motor. But generally, if it doesn't have pedals, it's an e-motorcycle.
Okay.
You can buy them at Lowe's. You can get them anywhere.
You can buy them. Yeah.
I think though that those aren't probably the bulk of the problem
There are
population.
Those are actually the police department's biggest.
Yeah, they're your biggest
Yeah,
problem. I
not-
think
that's
as
not
far
really
as
what you guys are
Parks is
talking about.
concerned, though, it's probably more the type 2 e-bikes being operated by mostly, or at least perceptually, kids between, let's just say, 12 and 16. And I think what we're running into is as an artifact of the problem that there is no gateway controlling who can operate those, unlike a motor vehicle. So at 16, to drive a car, you still have to take a certain amount of training hours. You have to have gotten your permit. You have to take a test. There is no process for anybody under that age to operate an e-bike. And I honestly believe that if we want to get serious about it, changing behaviors and requiring parents to change their behaviors with their kids, it could involve a permitting process to operate those types of e-bikes between certain ages. And if you have already a motor vehicle license, I'm not saying that we do a dual process where everybody who's 16 and up and already has a license would have to get a separate e-bike permit. And I don't know how this would play out, but one of the options could be creating a permitting process for under 16 operating a type 2 e-bike because it has a throttle, because then there's an opportunity to go, you must complete a training program with X number of hours of education, and you have to get signed off, and you have to go to the police department, and you have to get a card that shows you've done this. And then if you are involved in a stop operating your e-bike for whatever reason, whether it's you've got 3 kids hanging off of the back of it, or you're speeding on the core trail, or you're not wearing your helmet, there's an opportunity to check that and ramp up the consequences for failure to comply.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then we go back to enforcement again, which is what we're trying to.
Right, but I'm also saying you don't necessarily have to stop and check for that card, although if you were doing a helmet check, you could also check for that card. But it's one more layer to say, within the city of Steamboat, if you are 15 and under and operating an e-bike that has a throttle, you must have completed this and you must have that signed off card. Can you check it? Not until they do something else wrong, but during that something else, there's an opportunity to check for that and ramp up the consequence levels. And then if parents know that before they buy the bike or before they turn their kid loose on the bike, and they know that there's a $500 fine attached, they might be more willing to make them actually finish the process before they turn them loose with the bike. It's an option.
I'll just throw out with the permitting, obviously that'd take a lot, but I'm just thinking about it of a positive could also possibly be if there's theft. I know that some people's e-bikes are being stolen, supposedly the same key, if you have the same brand, keys work in like all the same brands. And so bikes are being stolen. And if they were registered with the permit, if you could track down the lost bike, but it would be a big process. But I have another thing I want to throw into the conversation about just thinking about coming at it from different angles is, so I have 2 kids on e-bikes and I talk to them all the time about how they need to go slow and be careful when they're passing, like all of those things. And I don't take what's happening on the core trail lightly because I want them to be respectful of people. But what's of most concern to me is when they're driving around on city streets. And I'm petrified that someone's going to run a red light and hit my kid when they're crossing the street. And I know you've been doing a lot more enforcement with red lights, But for me, that's where someone's going to die, is they're going to get hit by a car. If they crash into somebody on the core trail, there could still be serious injuries, but I think that's where we're going to have something. So then it makes me think about education of people who are driving cars.
There's more
That-
distracted drivers now.
Right.
than ever,
Is there an education campaign around Steamboat of just encouraging, you were sharing your example, right? Like, you never know what they're going to do, whether they're on an e-bike or whether they're on a regular bike. Like, even pedestrians crossing the street, like, you just have to be on your guard all the time.
Right, but the thing is those e-bikes, they go immediately.
They go faster. I know.
You know, it's like they got to get going on a bike or
Totally,
walking, and an
totally.
e-bike is just.
Yeah, totally. But I just throwing that into the conversation. You know, is there, if we're doing if we end up doing a large public campaign, is there also information to be put out to drivers?
So there
making sure you're
is,
paying attention.
with Bicycle Colorado, they do have an education program for cyclists with cars and vice versa.
Yeah.
They have this great education program that I recently learned about, and I need to look more into that. But yeah, I think that that's very important because I see the same thing with anyone on a bike and their behavior with a car. Funny, a lot of times it's drivers, people that are registered drivers, and their actions around cars are baffling. So it's not just kids, of course, but I think that that's also a very important part, how cars react with bikes and vice versa.
That's called the Bicycle Friendly Driver Program from Colorado Bikes, and it actually has been offered in Steamboat several times. Could be offered again, absolutely, but it's not something that we can require people to do either. And again, the people most likely to take it are probably not the ones that are going to hit me.
Yeah.
You guys bring some next for everybody?
You want some? Yeah.
Yeah.
Grab some.
Yeah.
There's some right.
Chief Beckett, do you guys have the authority to maybe delay somebody in getting their driver's license? So say you've got like a frequent offender on an e-bike and you have a couple, say 3 strikes, you're out. And guess what? Now, an e-bike, I teach my son, when you're on a bike, you are a car. You need to follow all the same rules as a car would when you're on that, when you're on that road. And if you can't handle a bike, you certainly can't handle a vehicle if you can't follow the same rules of the road on a bike than in a 10,000 pound vehicle going 35, 40 miles an hour down the road. Can you delay that person from getting their driver's license until, say, they're 17 or 18?
No, that's all
Okay.
legislatively handled by the Department of Motor Vehicles. So
Okay.
that's not a law enforcement thing at all.
Okay. I was just thought I had that, hey, if I screw up
Yeah.
on the e-bike, there's a
Like-
chance I might not be able to get my driver's license. Okay, I'm not.
Right. I mean, if we have unlicensed drivers and they receive a traffic citation, they're going to get, one of the things they'll be cited for is no license, and they'll get points, which would impact their ability to get a license. But to my knowledge, there's no state statutes that impact bicyclists or e-bikes at all that would transfer over to that. That would, I mean, what you guys are talking about, my world is limited to the law that's on paper. I don't draft law. That's way out of my wheelhouse. But you have a legislator, and I'm willing to bet, because of the conversations I have with the other chiefs of the other communities, and that fact that this is such a blanket problem across our state and our country, there would probably be flavor to get with a legislator to talk about something like that. But that's way outside of my wheelhouse. That would be something to talk to Representative Lukens or one of our other folks about.
So what do we want to end up with at the end of this meeting? I know it's a work session.
I was just going to ask.
So we're just talking about it.
Terry, Terry, based on our meeting that we had last night, do you feel like we hit all the, we've talked about Core Trail, different parts of the Core Trail. We've talked west of Steamboat Core Trail. We've talked about education. We've talked about helmets, talked about enforcement, talked about paint,
Signs.
signage on Lincoln.
Yeah, and I think a lot of things were brought up, like the throttle and the class 2.
And then do you, I guess I want to just make sure that we're walking away from this feeling like we have something with the city and the support to move forward. At least it sounds like it, on some aspects we do. And in terms of going into the schools and being a little bit more clear about how we're educating kids.
Yeah, we talked about last night the fact that when RCR is doing street smarts with the sixth graders, which is really, the one point where we do know that we engage with almost every sixth grader, but it's not year after year. It's just that one time.
How old is the sixth grader's 12, right?
Yes, it's the sixth graders.
That's when, is that generally when we're seeing, I don't know if this,
I don't know.
are we seeing e-bikers starting to engage at 12? Is that?
I think that many of the kids who do bike to school are already operating e-bikes, because one of the discussions that the CSOs who participate in street smarts have to reiterate to the kids clearly, and they do, is that, for example, they are not supposed to be operating in throttle mode on the Butcher Knife Trail. And that doesn't mean that it's actually being honored, but they do stress that during street smarts. But one of the other things we talked about emphasizing during street smarts is that our under 16s are not allowed to do a safety stop, rolling stop at a stop sign. They are required to actually come to a full, complete stop before pedaling through the stop sign, regardless of whether there are other vehicles present. The loophole to that is if they're with an adult, theoretically, they can roll the stop sign with the adult. But we did talk about making sure that messaging was very explicit during street smarts, and having led groups during street smarts. I will tell you, every time I'm riding out with the kids, I do make them stop at every stop sign, which is really challenging with about 10 to 15 kids who are simply excited to have been unleashed from school for a couple hours. But we make them do that. What we don't necessarily do clearly is explain to them why we're making them stop. I mean, yes, in the sense of physics takes over and cars will kill you, along with the fact that screwing with horses is bad on your bike and they will kill you. But we don't really say explicitly that the law requires them to stop. Those are things that RCR can do. I think a lot of this is RCR is happy to help on the education standpoint. We would be happy to, for example, do the painting on Lincoln sidewalks to say no bikes if that was an option offered to us. But really, a lot of it just comes down to the city's going to have to decide what at the parks level or at city policy level, what they want to see happen, and we can help message that and educate people on it. But I don't think without some policy changes, we won't see huge changes in behavior.
Yeah, and I think we're all very cognizant and aware, like as a community, of the dangers when you've got a lot of people on their bike in the summer. But I think our message is that we definitely want to partner with providing positive education and reinforcement of these laws that are what is in place with the city, and very much want to partner with education and just being out there sending a positive message that bikes are great, use them responsibly, we're here for you, but keeping it just so we connect with them and not in a, I mean, I'm scared to death when I see kids on a bike, like riding really fast down a street, but
Or at dusk and it's hard to see.
There's so many things where I'm like, oh my God. But that's from our point, we'd like to just engage in that message and bringing that forward in a positive way, educating our members, being part of some social media campaign.
Right. And I think that's where we're going to get our most traction, right? Is, we talk about no off leash and Butcher Knife between 7:30 and 8:30, something like that. That's when all the kids are on the trail. So if you guys were to set up, right there on Butcher Knife, in the mornings or in the afternoons when kids are getting off, you're going to hit a bunch of kids and not hit, but you'll catch everybody coming from school. And because I really think this is the low hanging fruit for us. Like if we want to get something going because we're never going to policy our way out of this. I think the lowest hanging fruit for us to be able to actually get something going is if you guys have a social media expert campaign, pop up on Butcher Knife, after school, before school, things like that. That's the stuff that I think we can get going in a very short order and make it impact.
Yeah. One of the questions that we've had along the line too is how do you measure it?
That's what I was just going to say. I was actually going to, if I can make a recommendation. I mean, I mentioned I'm taking a lot of notes. I would say that I think Angela in the notes, it was something about maybe if we wanted to do a work committee, I forget what the phrase was, like we did for the river stuff.
Oh, a subcommittee?
Subcommittee. Because I mean, it seems like I just wrote down, what do we want to impact? Like, what do we actually want? Do we want people to slow down when they're passing people? Do we want them to wear helmets? Like, I think we need to be more clear about what our objectives are. Like, how are we going to know that we've actually made a difference? And so I think there's more work to be done of what do we actually want to impact and then where. And I wrote down, it's the core trail, pinch points, downtown streets, Lincoln sidewalk. We talked about many different places and all of those need a different solution. And then there's a gazillion solutions. And so I would love to see there be a more focused effort versus just like throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping one of these things work. I think at the time we did this work session because we really wanted to address this issue. And so I would recommend that we do it in a concerted way.
Right, but I also think in a timely manner. I mean, if we do a subcommittee, it's going to be another month, 2 months before you get the subcommittee through, and then when do we actually start something? I mean, how hard would it be to put a social media campaign together?
Yeah, but what are we trying to impact and what's our message? I mean, I'm still talking. I hear you that we need time, but we also, again, if we aren't actually knowing what we're addressing and how do we want to address it, we don't know. We're actually not going to get any.
Right, but I think in about a minute and a half, we could all go through about wear your helmets on the e-bikes, watch your speed on the core trail, announce your passing, just simple social media posts that we can make fun, that we can get out there right now instead of having a subcommittee that in 2 months we decide to put together a social media campaign.
Well, we're coming into winter. There'll be fewer cyclists out there. I'd like to point out that there's a lot of engaged parents and a lot of really responsible kids too. They don't want to get hit by a car. They don't want to get in trouble. Like, I have seen a lot of good behavior there's going to be the crowd that's like, oh, I see a kid on an e-bike and I automatically think they're being dangerous. Oh,
It could be the same kid we're all seeing too.
it could be. I think there is.
Yeah. It wasn't a problem at all.
Go on.
Just real quick, respectfully, Commissioner Kelly, I mean, we're in November. I think this is the perfect time to form a subcommittee because by the time and you're right. I mean, subcommittees take forever and they can be, everybody likes a good committee. But the idea is that we get ready for next bike season.
Yeah.
No, I get that. And I respect that. I just, I usually like to do things instead of, inordinate amount of time talk about it, because the sooner you get the message out there, whether it's wintertime or summertime, and a social media campaign doesn't cost that much. And as soon as you get it out there, the sooner it's going to be in their heads. And the more time someone sees something, the more apt they are to listen to it. So that's my point.
I'm probably one of the most impatient people at my bank because I just want to get stuff done. And I have found that when the appropriate amount of thought and process is put in place, you can actually have a much bigger impact. So I like the idea of being measured and trying to define what your objectives are. So,
Angela, what are the next steps from a meeting like this typically?
If you want to form a subcommittee, that's absolutely within your decision-making tonight. I heard some reference to wanting, I think from RCR members versus commission members about policy. The e-bike use policy for city trails was updated based upon your recommendations within the last year. You can relook at that if you want. That has 15-mile-per-hour speed limits, 10-mile-per-hour speed limits on certain trails, the requirement for helmets. So that is within your scope too. If you want to set up a subcommittee, I'd encourage you to appoint some members tonight. I know I'm happy to have someone from my team participate and see what options we have. Otherwise, in all of the notes I took as well, there seems to be a good amount of consensus of trying to have some summer pop-up events, look at signage improvements on the core trail. And I know I'm happy to have my team participate and work on those efforts too.
Yeah. And my takeaway is it seems like RCR really, this is something that you'd like to be involved with. And I, highlighted and circled PR and media campaign because I think locally, a big piece was getting in touch with parents. And I think between social media, Steamboat Pilot, Steamboat Radio, if there is a campaign that was out there, that's probably the best way to do that. And so maybe there is some kind of subcommittee that's formed to focus on how to do that, who funds it, when it happens, those kinds of things. And I think, this meeting's been really productive. I think there's a lot of good ideas on the table.
I would be happy to do whatever I would happy to do whatever needs to be done to be part of that subcommittee.
You want to be part be on the subcommittee?
I do.
Make a motion to create a subcommittee.
Since it's a work session, you technically can't make decisions.
Make a suggestion. to me.
Yeah, just don't make a motion.
Suggestion.
Okay.
Would any other Parks and Rec commissioners like to be on the subcommittee with Commissioner High?
I'd be willing to be on it.
Awesome.
Sure.
And I'm assuming our RCR members are
Yes.
on board?
We'd love to do that.
Great.
Enthusiastic.
Maybe even all three.
Um,
There's about 4 other people that
I can be on it too if we need more commissioners.
great.
That's great.
Love it.
We'll send an email wrap up to the three of you guys and pull in you as well and have you get started. I'm assuming PD and Public Works. Is it okay if we invite you as guests as needed?
Please.
We appreciate your guys' time tonight to help
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
explain the
Super helpful.
complexities. It's very helpful.
Yeah, that was super helpful. I, of course, like to oversimplify things. So thank you for making it more complex in my mind.
Krista, if you don't know Krista Amatuzio, I mean, she can articulate it 100 times better. I mean, she knows, I don't know how she knows all she knows, but she gets into the weeds. She knows all the differences on the e-bikes. So, and she knows all the Muni code stuff.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Do we have any other questions? Okay. Appreciate all the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
We done?
Do we have any public comment? We didn't, do we do public comment?
But we need to.
Yeah.
They are still welcome to leave though. There is no one online and no
Yeah,
one
it
in the
doesn't look
audience.
like we have any in the room. Well, I didn't skip it.
There you go.
Oh, we actually just had somebody enter the waiting room.
Participation.
Would you like to call for public comment one more time?
Yeah, do we have any public comment in the room or online?
All right.
All right. Well, that'll move us on to upcoming agenda.
Yeah, we have the budget. We pushed, knowing tonight's meeting was going to be a bit longer, we pushed 2026's budget overview to next month. So we'll be holding that then. As far as director updates go, probably the biggest things going on in our world was the adoption of the 2026 budget. So we'll highlight what projects that will include and kind of our standard services, all of that in December. We already hit the Whistler update and the acquisitions there. Besides that, as you've noticed, our team's working hard to get Howelson open. We do have a great team staffed up for this season. I'm really looking forward to it. But yeah, just encourage everybody to go by their house and pass and get ready for winter.
Just need one important component to that.
Snow.
I know.
I'm cold.
At least we're getting cold temps the last couple nights.
Yeah, totally.
I will say that the first year that Haymaker opened, I played golf on December 4th. So it could be worse.
That's our longest standing day too, that we've been open in the year. So
Yeah.
yeah, good to know somebody who did that.
Any director updates? That's kind of it.
Those were them, yeah.
All right. Well, next meeting will be on December 10th. Does anybody want to bring a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, you guys.
You just said December 10th and I was like, why is it going to be 2 months from now?
Yeah.
And I was like,
It's
wait a minute.
It's